Joining us now on the Megacast is Carrie Krawiec. She is the therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic, back with us once again on today's edition of the program. Carrie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Morning to you as well. So we're in the thick of the fall season, or coming up on the fall season. School is back in session, both at all levels, elementary, middle, high school, and even at the college level as well. And with this time of year, something that everyone loves to focus on as a little bit of an escape, but also an activity, is sports. But for our athletes, there are certain pressures that are put on them and struggles that they deal with that are unique from other people in the general population that aren't athletes playing in a competitive level where there is some level of scrutiny. So for you and for other professionals, what are some of those common issues that you see with athletes and what they go through being in the thick of competition, and sometimes the pressure and the attention that can come with that competition?
Absolutely. So in a lot of ways, youth sports is a wonderful activity when it comes to mental health. So in general, kids that are active in sports, a variety of different sports, have, better teamwork skills, some self-esteem benefits, some problem solving, and some resilience to going through hard things. What we're talking about here, the youth, young adults, and children who really suffer are the ones that have their entire identity wrapped around a specialized sport, right? That because in those sort of really highly competitive environments, the drive to be number one and perfect is there. And often those people are very fearful of being seen as weak or somehow imperfect, which can lead to anxiety and stress, or even fear of disclosing some of those mental health concerns. It also may put them at higher risk for sort of other mental health issues, such as extreme dieting, perhaps using substances to augment their performance, or using supplements that maybe we don't know much about. So there are sort of a variety of issues that can plague the student athletes that are in those really highly specialized positions.
And has the advent of social media, do you think that that's also played a factor in this? Because so many of these athletes, this is at the high school level, that's the highest level they're ever going to play ball. But for some that are looking at the next level, looking to get into college, D1, D2, D3, whatever it may be, and even those that are at a high level and know they're going to be playing at that next level, I would imagine that can add even more pressure because there's simply just more eyes on you.
Absolutely. And I think we saw this even with Simone Biles at the last Olympics, when she was having those difficulties with the twisties. And then, the world is weighing in their opinion about whether she's legit or whether it's fake or whatever it might be. That's just one whole level of pressure that's completely separate from her craft. And so I think that there's certainly burdens like that would affect athletes as well.
Joined by Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic on today's edition of the Megacast. You can find more information at birminghammaple.org. That's birminghammaple.org for more information from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. And again, contact with them. My apologies, birminghammaple.com, not .org. It's .com. The phone number 248-646-6659, 248-646-6659. For more information. And what's different with athletes than some people in more of the general population is they are around so many people, and they're around these different, especially in large team sports, you have that support system that's kind of built in. But that can also kind of be, while that's a great big group of people that are all working together, sometimes it can be tough to really confide in other people on that team about the situation that you're in. What suggestions do you have for athletes in that situation to address some of these issues they may be having, or at least talk it through with somebody that may be having some of those shared experiences themselves?
Sure, absolutely. I think you're totally right. On a team, you may have the feeling that the team is dependent on you, and then you don't want to let anybody down. And so then you're even forced to conceal more. And just like any injury, if you're concealing the injury, if you're concealing some sort of mental health injury, it will eventually come out in some other way. So, you do want to take the rest you need and the rehabilitation you need. I think that coaches and parents and adults can be very useful here to start the conversation, to make sure that they can check their own anxieties. Like, yes, you may have to sit out from a certain event, or you may have to scale back on some practices to take care of yourself. And there may feel anxiety by those adults, like, oh, this is going to really maybe change a once in a lifetime opportunity. But you need to be communicating to that person that while there are exciting opportunities, and some of them maybe once in a lifetime, this is not just their life, right? Like, they are still humans, and we need to be, aware of their development, their age, and their humanity when we talk about the importance and relevance of whatever sport they're participating in.
Again, more information, you can get in contact with the Birmingham Maple Clinic at birminghammaple.com. birminghammaple.com, 248-646-6659. We're joined by Carrie Krawiec, a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic. What advice do you have for coaches at all levels, particularly at the high school level and at the college level, where those pressures seem to be a little bit more intense in athletics than they are at some of the lower levels and the younger levels when these kids are really just learning the game? What advice do you have for coaches on what they can look out for and the steps that they can take either outwardly or just, kind of behind the scenes with their players, with their athletes to help them through these kinds of situations?
Certainly, I think, there's a huge drop off in youth sports. So by the time kids are 13, kids who are participating in sports regularly, there's just a nosedive by 13 where a lot of people leave. So I think that if coaches, of course, they're concerned about, creating the best possible team, in a competitive way, they might need to be considering retention. And one of the things that's really getting in the way from kids wanting to continue is the pressure, the stress involved, and the sense that if they can't be number one, then they're not relevant in that spot. And so I think that coaches can do more to probably to kind of highlight, right, like what all of the involvement that's important to being involved in sports, and use that as a part of the culture. Certainly being aware and kind of being aware, like you said, of what's going on social media. What are the conversations? What are the buzz? Not tuning a blind eye, but maybe having some sort of boots on the ground when it comes to what are the pressures when it's in substance use. Are there suicide risks, extreme dieting? I think coaches can be really involved in kind of paying attention, just like parents can, and what's the culture of youth these days.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic on today's edition of the Megacast. Carrie, for those coaches and athletes alike, even parents that are involved in the broad scope of high school and collegiate athletics and even youth athletics that are looking at these issues, some may say, well, we don't necessarily think that this is going to be important. It's not really affecting performance. It's not really affecting their bodies necessarily. Give us some insight on just how some of these mental health struggles can ultimately affect somebody's performance on the field, because for some, that might be a deciding factor in them speaking up or in those involved in these athletics on their team at the coaching level, at the parenting level, taking this issue seriously.
Absolutely. I think the worst case scenario absolutely would be just one suicide. So, I think that it is a possibility. It was only a few months ago, a very high level Stanford hockey player took her life in 2022, and whom was seen at the highest of her career at a very prestigious university, and the pressures of managing both academics and performance on the ice rink were just too much. And so I think that the potential to save one life should always be a motivator. In the most extreme sense. But yeah, I want to circle back to your question, but I'm sure, there would be other things to be aware of too, like if you need a rest, if you need an off day, to allow for that, just like any other injury, and that preventing burnout would be because the risk to the team is that a person just quits the sport altogether, so to offer that as offering time as a way to stay and come back replenished and rejuvenated would be a goal.
Going back to what we touched on earlier, the role that social media can play in some of these pressures, especially for athletes today, given the circumstances, particularly at the college level and the pro level with name, image, and likeness licensing, mm-hmm. and all these different deals they can have, and really even beyond that, at the most broad, basic level, the interaction that these players at all these different levels, including at the high school level, can have with fans, both their own and those from other teams, that can also have a huge impact on somebody's mental health, because very often sports fans are nasty with each other, let alone Sure. with these players. And that doesn't really discriminate between youth athletics, teen athletics, and collegiate Sure. and pro athletics. What advice do you have for athletes, particularly those at some of the higher levels, college and maybe even emerging into the pros or semi-pros that are dealing with some of these pressures and this noise from social media, which for them, is part of building a brand for themselves, an identity for themselves, and getting to those levels, but also can be quite toxic in their life.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, right, too, is even coaching people along the way, children as they're getting involved, some heckling, like you're saying, or even the sort of razzing that goes on between players. Part of it is part of the sport. When you're an adult and if you're familiar, you may see these guys, act this way. I'm a fan of MMA. So you see these guys act this way in the press conferences and they're mouthing off during the fight. But after it's over, they shake hands. And if you've seen them out and about, they're enjoying dinner with their families together, so it's like their friends, their coworkers, their colleagues. Part of that is part of the theater of sports and not necessarily real. So it's important, though, too, to be able to make that distinction. And youth at every age, or people who do suffer from depression or anxiety, might not be able to discern those things, what is real and what is not, or that there's a boundary there. So certainly offering that education to people, that it's not necessarily real.
Even if an athlete maybe isn't suffering from any of these sort of mental health ailments that are pretty common with athletes and even those in the general population, what benefit can they take from speaking with a therapist or another mental health professional in the process of them playing these sports and developing into these sports?
Sure. I mean, talk therapy is incredibly useful when it comes to treating depression and anxiety, especially for people who feel like maybe they cannot go to the people that are yet the closest to them in their lives. It offers a space that's unbiased, non-judgmental, and really has no connection or influence on those other people or influenced by those other people. So a therapy can be a private and safe place to talk about these things. And in some ways, a healthful way to compartmentalize, that you can sort of unload your burdens in that space and then go back and refocus on your whatever discipline your sport is.
And it's another way too to just kind of talk through the situations you're going through, some of the struggles you're having in your development and your strategy and in your consideration of your games coming up, getting some of those anxieties out before you go into the process of those competitions can also be incredibly helpful. Carrie, any other advice for athletes, for parents, for coaches of athletes in terms of mental health on their teams before we let you go today?
I think especially for students and student athletes who seem highly successful, there can be a misunderstanding that, like, how could this person be depressed? They've got everything going for them. They're at peak performance physically. They're doing well academically. The assumption is there's no way to be unhappy because look at everything that's going well. And I think to that answer is for people to understand depression isn't being sad when everything is sad. That's just being sad. Depression is being sad when everything is going well and still feeling bad about it. And that is when you really need to kind of plug in and get some treatment, ask hard questions like you and I talked a week or two ago. Ask someone forthright. Do they feel like hurting or harming themselves? Like, have they lost in some way their will to live? Even if they seem, like I said, even if they seem super physically and mentally on top of it, just ask the question in a bold way and your answer will help lead you to the kind of treatment that's needed.
Carrie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.